Bonjour et bienvenue chez nous. I am Mary-Ellen Cannellan, the Executive Director of the Alliance Française of Chicago, and I am delighted to have you join us today for the launch of Chic and You, the French Fashion Fair. It's a forum for ideas about the changes that are sweeping the fashion industry. But also, it's a feast for the fashion-starved. Now we can be all dressed up and have somewhere to go every Thursday and next Friday as well at the cocktail hour, all the way until Thanksgiving. Now, for those of you who are new to Zoom, I just want to bring something to your attention. You've been muted upon arrival and will remain muted to avoid sound interference during the talk. But we encourage you to talk to us using the chat line. What's that about? The chat line is at the bottom of your screen. Bring your cursor down there, a ribbon pops up, and you'll see an icon that says chat. Just click on that and let us know where you're listening from. And as well, please use it to communicate with us with any questions that you have during the presentation, and we'll make sure that our wonderful guests will answer as many as possible. Now, this series wouldn't have been possible without the extraordinary support of our partners, the Jean Bodfish Brown Memorial Fund, our partners at the School of the Art Institute and the Fashion Resource Center, as well as the City of Chicago. They gave us a marvelous grant from the Department of Cultural and Special Events. And this grant allows us to make it possible to offer une entrée libre, free admission to students who are studying French language and culture in universities across the Midwest, as well as schools here in the city of Chicago, our own Lycée Français de Chicago. And finally, we have a very special thank you to the Palais Galliera for permission to use the illustrations that are being used in this presentation today. Bienvenue à tout le monde. We also want to say thank you more than mille fois to the thinkers, the creators behind this series. The co-curator Alexander Aubry, who is the director of the Fashion Resource Center. Also another early supporter, Patrizia Di Carrobio, who's one of the most famous precious stones and vintage jewelry merchants in New York. And finally, our last co-curator, who is our own Aimée Laberge, our Director of Programming. I'd like to introduce her now, sans plus tarder, without any delay, Madame Laberge.
Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à l'Alliance Française. Thank you so much, Mary-Hélène. I will like now to introduce our guests. We are going to Paris today, where fashion historian Laurent Cotta. Laurent, you're there, right? Yes. And we'll be in conversation with lifestyle reporter Sylvie Berkowicz. Sylvie, ça va? D'accord. With them, we will go back in time to the 30s, travel from Paris to New York, and learn about the impact of Hollywood Technicolor on French fashion. All this through the exquisite illustrations of Renee de Bouët-Willaumez, kept in the archives of the Musée de la Mode de Paris ou Palais Galliera. I will just say a few words about the achievement of Laurent and Sylvie before we give them la parole. Art and fashion historian Laurent Cotta has spent 12 years in charge of the contemporary creation department in the Palais Galliera, Musée de la Mode de Paris, before developing the graphic arts department called Le Cabinet d'Art Graphique, a trove of photographs, illustration, and publication documenting the representation of fashion. Laurent curated exhibitions such as Madame Carven, Grand Couturier, Sylvie Vartan, Revue de Mode, and the 60th anniversary of the creation of Elle magazine exhibition at the Galerie Lafayette department store. He also co-curated with Olivier Saillard, Madame Gray, La couture à l'œuvre at the Musée Bourdelle, et le 18e Au goût du jour at the Grand Trianon in Versailles. Laurent also teaches at Parsons Paris since 2018, at the Institut Français de la Mode since 2015, and he was part of the École du Louvre Chair of Fashion History with a specificity for contemporary fashion. I will add he's been a frequent collaborator to the Alliance Française network in the US, thanks to his deep knowledge of fashion. Sans plus attendre, Sylvie, Laurent, nous vous accueillons parmi nous.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Well, evening for us, midday for you. Laurent and I are not very far one from the other. Bonsoir, Laurent.
Bonsoir, Sylvie.
We're going to start immediately with you meeting the work of Renee de Bouët-Willaumez. Why did you find so interesting? How did you, what was so special about his illustration?
It's very lavish. They are very impressive illustrations. They are very typical of the style of I will succeed in saying that, of the style of the late 30s and the beginning of the 40s illustration. But I like in particular his way of playing with colors. And I think there's something absolutely unique in Renee de Bouët-Willaumez illustration. Maybe we can call him RBW because Bouët-Willaumez is not necessarily easy to understand. And RBW is very interesting in my opinion, because at the first sight, you have the impression it's very conservative in type of illustrations. And after the first sight, you realize that there are many interesting little things, little details, especially for the colors, but there's something unique in his work. That's his connection with the aesthetic of the cinema of the same time. And he's great because he makes an incredible link between Parisian chic and Hollywood glamour and American glamour, by the way.
We're going to see that afterwards, more in details. But tell me, is it somebody that is famous in your world? Is it somebody that you had to study about him? How did you get in touch with some of the work he made at the museum, at the Palais Galliera, or way before?
We received an important donation in our museum in 1986, 7 years after his death. It was a donation by his widow, and she gave the museum a series of 40 original drawings by Renee de Bouët-Willaumez, commissioned by American Vogue. And that's about that. Well, he's not very well known now for people who don't know much about fashion illustration, but he was one of the star illustrators for Vogue, whether in the States, in Paris or in London, in the 30s and until the very beginning of the 50s. So,
exactly. So now we see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, here you don't have any illustration by Renee de Bouët-Willaumez, but I think it's interesting because you have two styles of cover. On the left-hand side, you have a cover from French Vogue of 1926, and the other one is US Vogue in 27. So you can see two different types of style, of elegance, and of chic. You have something which is completely abstract for the French Vogue, which is well, just about something elegant, but which has nothing to see with it's not realistic at all. And on the other side, for US Vogue, you have something which is in the logic of modernity, of something absolutely new, with this drawing by Le Pape, well, a French illustrator, by the way, but showing the portrait of Lee Miller, who was to become, a few years later, a very important photographer. But by those days, she was a model.
And maybe we should remind that Vogue US was born before Vogue France.
Sure. It was born in the end of the 19th century in 1892. The title was bought by Condé Nast in 1909, and the French Vogue, the Parisian Vogue, was launched in 1920. Well, that was the opportunity to this publishing group to have a sort of outpost in Paris and to make the difference with other titles, because they tried to forge links with the couturier, the world of the couturier there, and to be extremely au courant with French couture. They wanted also to hire different artists in France, being, well, writers, of course, for this French edition, being illustrators and photographers at the same time. Here you have first view on the work of Renee de Bouët-Willaumez. The illustration was made in New York. Well, he traveled between Paris and New York in the 40s. He was hired in French Vogue in 1929, by the way, by Meinbocker, who was the chief editor of French Vogue by then, and who was replaced a few weeks later by Michel de Brunoff, who was a very, very important person in the world of French publishing. Well, here you have a view. Well, it's not exactly a sketch made from life, but I think he made many little sketches from life to recreate this impression of reality, of what was the studio of Elsa Maxwell. You can see on an armchair on the left-hand side of the picture. And it's a concert organized by weekly by Elsa Maxwell there. So it gives an idea of Café Society in New York, which was published for the American Vogue. And there's something particular with Renee de Bouët-Willaumez. He worked in Paris. He worked between Paris and New York. He traveled several times to New York in the 30s, and it's where he married, by the way. And but he was commissioned mainly by US Vogue, and his illustrations sometimes were republished in French Vogue a few months or a few weeks later. Well, here's something which is interesting to my eyes, because it's about transatlantic culture. It's one moment, once again, a sort of recreation of the boarding on an ocean liner, on a ship going from the Havre to New York. And you have two options there, two rather interesting options there. It's always narrative, you know, the illustrations by Renee de Bouët-Willaumez, even myself, I can't pronounce it. A woman in sportswear, well, we're in the morning, you know, with a tweed coat, with the little dog, with a lot of luggage, and something which is more unexpected. Women in evening gowns. In evening gowns, no, not goats, sorry, in evening gowns. Which was something typical of the period.
Yes. What we can see is that it's much more than just fashion, it's a lifestyle.
Oh, that's lifestyle. And there's something which is very, very much unexpected for us, is people used to go before boarding on a ship. They spend the night in nightclubs, in fancy nightclubs. Apparently, they had fancy nightclubs in Le Havre by those days, which is not the case by now. Maybe I'm not. Well, maybe I'm wrong. But well, you know, they had to have fancy nightclubs in the 30s in this city, in this little city in France, for this particular reason, because they had the clients. And so it was possible to board on a ship in the morning with this type of evening
a night out
in the boat, and you know, top hats for the men. And so, well, just about Renee de Bouët-Willaumez, well, you can see him photographed by Irving Penn in 1947. It's just in the background. Well, that's typical of Irving Penn type of composition. And just to give you an idea of this feminine ideal, you have two of his wives. He had three wives, by the way. The first one he married in the beginning of the 30s was Bab Rawlings, who was a model in the beginning. Well, I think he had a sort of soft spot for models, by the way. And Babs Rawlings, after her divorce, became an editor at Vogue at the same time. And the second one he married in New York when he came there, when he settled there in '39, was another model, Margaret Minnie-Garraud, who became also an interior designer. Mm-hmm. I don't have any photo for the third one that he married. She was much younger than him. that he married when he came back to France in the beginning of the 50s, and that's this widow who gave us the series of drawings to.
But there is also something important to mention. This is the family background of our video.
Yes, the family background is very important, and maybe that's not the explanation, but it can explain the success he had. Well, it's about snobbery, by the way. Well, he was a very talented guy, but he was born in 1900 in Rennes, in Brittany. His father was a count. Well, he was first when he was young, he entered the prestigious school for engineers, was École Centrale, who's a very old and very prestigious school for being an engineer in France. He graduated, of course, but after a few years, he realized it was terribly boring for him, and he decided to be a fashion illustrator, which sounds a little odd. But let's imagine that being an engineer, you had also to learn how to draw for something very technical. You had to be extremely precise. It was a very, very demanding type of teaching, and maybe that explains the very precise and accurate stroke that you will see on the drawings by Renee Villame.
And of course, watching all the women around him in France, in his family, all the socialites at that time.
Yes, that's just about that, and which is interesting, or of course for Vogue, for US Vogue. Considering his background, it was a sort of guarantee of old continent elegance in the pages of the magazines. And speaking about the physical type of women across the Atlantic Ocean, in the beginning of the 30s, there was an incredible trend about what was called American type of beauty. Well, with very slender, tall, and athletic women. That was the fashion by then. And sometimes it's impossible to know if those women are American or French, because, well, that's something I can't explain to myself, but fashion is so strong that it can model your body, it can reshape your body. And that was the case, because those two women, I don't know, for an American audience, I think they look very much American. In fact, they're not. They are French, and there were socialites represented, but photographed in the pages of French Vogue, by the way. And it was a few years before the arrival of Wallis Simpson in the press, and this phrase by Wallis Simpson, never too
rich, never too slim.
Never too slim, never too rich. Well, that's something about that. And that's the type of women which is represented in this illustration by Renee Villame in 35. By the way, it's like something, like a shot taken on a street, but you see that's this very elongated silhouette, this androgynous silhouette at the same time. That's the perfect type of female beauty by then.
So it's a Parisian couture in a modern American silhouette, in a way.
Exactly. And that's something, if I have enough time, there was an interesting phenomenon in the end of the 1920s. Well, there was a very, very important competition between two of the most important fashion houses in Paris, Jean Patou and Chanel. And they hired American models because they were extremely in favor. They were very, very fashionable. And there was a competition between the two houses. And finally, the result was the American models earned a lot of money, because one house wanted this particular American model for their show and things like that. So it explained that they earned in the end, in the beginning of the 30s, but absolute fortunes just for one show, or for being hired in one house in particular. So it gives an idea of this sort of folly about this type of new silhouette, by the way.
Okay. We can see on the next one, which is coming now, this idea of a woman that is
Yes.
bored. There is an attitude in every of his drawing. There is really a lot of attitude.
Yes. And fashion is about attitude as well. It's not about. It's not only about clothes. It's not about accessory. It's about the way you're mixing all that, the accessories, the garments, all the thing you want. But it's especially about attitudes, and it's why, for instance, movies are so interesting in our field of investigation, because you have the attitudes, you have the gesture, and here you have a frozen gesture and a frozen attitude for that. And that was commissioned once again for the American Vogue, but it depicts something which is supposed to be very, very Parisian in terms of chic and of level of sophistication. Finally, it gives the code. Well, how to behave, how to move when you have this type of accessory or this type of garment, and it gives you also the situation, the hour of the day where it was possible to wear this type of turban, for instance, which is very, very impressive. We are here in 35. The attitude is interesting. Well, we can place that in the late evening in the salon of a palace, for instance, because for a respectable woman, it was impossible to be alone even in an elegant cafe. It was possible if you were with a friend or your fiancé, your husband, whatever, but it was possible in the elitist place of a palace. And I think that's the case. Maybe she's waiting for a man, I don't know, her fiancé, her husband, well, her lover, who knows. And she looks a little bored, but she doesn't, it's not boredom necessarily. It's more about melancholy. She doesn't look haughty. She could, but not necessarily as well. She looked distant and she looks dreamy. She couldn't look haughty or contemptuous, because it was supposed very, very petit bourgeois by those days to do that, or very middle class. So you had to be distant, you had to be inaccessible. You had to be inaccessible for moral reason if you were on your own in a place like that, because you didn't have to be accessible to people especially men you didn't know. And well, you know, she's the inaccessible star. That's something about that.
Yes, and we see that, you know, that everything is so obvious in a few lines, and there is something in the fashion which is really effortless. Super elegant and effortless at the same time.
And we are going back to tradition of elegance and we go back to the 16th century with Castiglione and his notion of sprezzatura. Everything should be perfect but look effortless, and that's exactly the case for René de Bouët-Willaumez drawings, who are always very masterful, and it looks always very easy at the same time. Same thing here. With this illustration from 38. And here I think it's interesting, and we can see why the American publishers were so keen on René de Bouët-Willaumez's illustration, because they were extremely precise and accurate. Well, the fashion in this year in particular, in 38, was about flower patterns, which is obvious in this illustration. And the Condé Nast wanted to have something very, very precise for the illustration. We have to keep in mind that those magazines were made to sell fashion, by the way, to sell the magazine first, but afterwards to sell fashion, and they had to be as precise as possible. And that's the case here, because it's stylized at the same time, but you have a precise idea of the suit in this case. You have an idea of suggestions of the garments to wear with that. You know, those contrasted in color gloves and hats. And you, once again, you have the attitudes. You have the social codes, which is given to you, how to move, how to behave with this type of garment. Well, it's high sophistication, it's high level of sophistication. It looks very French, but it's not necessarily very French. It could be at the Plaza Hotel in New York, in any big palace across the Atlantic Ocean, by the way.
So you said that RBW was traveling back and forth in the US before getting for real in New York, like moving to New York for the rest of his life. When was that? Was 39, right?
It's in 39, yes. It's in the beginning of the war in France, in the beginning of September, the 3rd of September 39. Well, maybe, I don't know, maybe he went there because he didn't want to fight for his country. I think that's not very probable, considering his background. While being an aristocrat, he had to do so, but maybe he favored his artistic career, and it was impossible, by the way, to send a drawing from France to the States in wartime. Well, he knew the States very well. He enjoyed the US, and especially living in New York. And for him, for leading his career, it was much easier to settle in New York in the beginning of 39. And maybe this illustration was made in Paris a few weeks before he decided to go to New York. That's once again for the American issue of Vogue. Well, it's the reason why you have this type of exotic landscape with the Eiffel Tower in the background. And well, this drawing was not published, by the way, but that's obvious. We are in 39 because of the shape of the fur coat, which is certainly by Révillon. And you notice those very square and broad shoulders. That was the fashion, the very last fashion for this year, and it will last in France and in the States, I think, until the mid 40s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then we can see a portrait, a close-up, something which is to me more maybe arty, even though it's also maybe fashion, selling a hat or showing some fabrics, but which is more painting to me.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's more painting, it's more arty. And here we can see the influence of another very, very important illustrator by then in France and in the States, who was Christian Bérard. We're in a style which was called neo-romanticism by then. Well, you know, with those pastel colors, this dreamy face, and the choice of the color is very interesting as well. Well, you notice all the time those little touch of bright colors to illuminate the illustration. Well, to me, it's rather French, this type of melancholy and dreamy type of figure. It's not as modern as if you remember the cover of US Vogue with this portrait of Lee Miller by Le Pape, for instance. It's more European, in my opinion, this one.
Yeah. So we see once again that it's always narrative, and it's always some what I call sketch from life, but we try to figure out who are those people. What do they do for living? Maybe not much. They just spend their money buying clothes and having drinks. But it's always intriguing to see a scene like that and to try to understand who are the people. Where are they? You know, are they in France? Are they I don't know, in Miami? On the Riviera in France? There is always something about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because in fact, this type of people, this type of society is very remote from our way of living. They were rich and rich people who didn't have to work necessarily, or maybe the men were in the finance or something like that, but they were absolutely loaded with money. That's everything is said in those in those illustrations. And there's something which is interesting in those years, in the late 30s and 40s. That's the operation of Café Society, which is international and which is transatlantic in particular. At one point, it's impossible to say if it's in Miami, if it's in Palm Beach, in Biarritz or on the French Riviera. That's the same type of living, and the only evidence of that is when you have the name of the clothes which are worn by the women. In the previous case, there were clothes by Hattie Carnegie or creations made for Bergdorf and Goodman. So it's the States. Mm-hmm. And same thing here. We are in a chic cafe. It can be in Paris or in New York for the cafe. May we see next with the little hat. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. No, previous with the two hats.
It's different, but it's always showing a situation.
Yes.
And once again, we never really know. You know better than us, but you know because of the fashion of the clothes. Where are the people? But it's always these things about being somewhere. It's a little movie in already.
Oh. That's very cinematographic. Yes, this narrative comes from the influence of the movies, and here it could be in a sort of comedy. Notice the face of the man in the middle. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, he looks very much like James Stewart. I don't know if you think so, but that's something about it. And here it's an interesting illustration, I think. Well, it could be in Paris or in New York, but well, we have a little indication written underneath the drawing, which says the colony, at the colony. So it's in New York. And it was just to illustrate an article which was entitled How to Dress to Please Men. So you see, you have two options, something which is very chic, which is, well, just the top of the chic, of the elegance, which is about understatement. That's the case of the woman who's sipping tea with her beige suit and the perfect little hat and everything. Well, we can imagine she's the fiancée or the wife of the man in the middle. And you have something which is not chic at all, but very efficient, very effective, and very conspicuous at the same time. And apparently she attracts the attention of the man in the middle. But here you have what to do and the fashion faux pas. The fashion faux pas, of course, is for the bejeweled woman who's overdressed for the situation. Because
was it obvious for the readers that it was the faux pas and the elegant one?
Yes. By those days, I think it was absolutely obvious because it's too much. It's like an outfit designed by a costume designer for Hollywood, while depicting a woman of well, you see what maybe you see what I mean. I don't know, but not exactly the kind of woman you will marry. Well, we are at 5 o'clock because they are having tea, and she's just overdressed. It's too much. It's something that she may wear for a cocktail, and here it's just over the top. You know, she has too much fur, too many jewels. She's a little too made up at the same time, but apparently it works very, very well for the man in the middle. And the article was just about that. Well, maybe it's not, if you want to attract men, don't be too chic because it won't work.
Well, this is something different. This is also much more wearable, something that obviously is made for women to be dressed like that. There is something about also the arrival of ready-to-wear.
Yes, that's about ready-to-wear.
Most of what we've seen is couture, right? But there is
previously, yes, because the little suit was by Molineux. On the little beige suit on the previous picture was by Molineux. Here it's ready-to-wear, well, luxurious ready-to-wear. sold by important department store, American department stores. But you know, it's exactly the same technique, the same demanding skill, and the same level of aesthetics that he used for ready to wear and haute couture. That's not about that's not his concern, by the way. And that was one of the demand of the American edition. No distinction about that. The garments had to be desirable for the client, and they were, by the way. They were sometimes very much inspired by French haute couture. Sometimes they were more creative, they were more comfortable. That's the case now. Just look at the attitude of the woman in front of her door. And once again, it's important. Well, if you don't have if you don't know who designed the garments, well, in fact, they were designed for department stores. It's impossible to know if you're in the States or if you're in France. You don't have so many information about that. Maybe it's a little too comfortable and too informal to be French, but I'm not so sure, by the way. And maybe I have that in mind because I know that that comes from American department stores. Here it's the same thing. Is it in France? Is it in the States? We absolutely don't know. We have in mind the musicals by Fred Astaire and so of the late 30s. We are in 39, by the way, because the dress which is worn, the evening gown which was worn there comes from the last collection by Madeleine Vionnet in 39. But you know, from between Paris and New York in this kind of 9 clubs, there were the same type of music, the same dances who were fashionable by then, and just in the background on the left you have a couple who certainly was hired by the owner of the club to perform the dance just like in the type of dance you had in the musicals from Hollywood by then.
And we can see also in the background, very much in the background. So the I suppose this is the man, you know, pouring wine or champagne. Yes. It's something very small, but it makes all the difference in the image.
Absolutely, that makes the difference, and it's always very funny. You always have to look at those little details in the background with little caricature of men. He never, or very seldom, makes caricature of women, but for men, he was not very, very, very kind.
And this is what makes the image so lively, you know, that those little details, you know. Same thing here. We have this spectacular gown in the first.
On the foreground.
Exactly, foreground. Thank you. And a little bit of something happening, and those stripes, you know, matching the dress, which is to me.
Yeah, there's also something happening in the background, and especially, well, it's about drawing, but it's interesting to have those little touches of bright red in the end, just to match the green evening coat on the foreground. Here, that's the same thing. That's French haute couture, but I think the image in itself is rather American. It's Hollywood style, red carpet style, by the way. And the composition is very cinematographic as well, because you have the impression it's represented with a sort of back dive. I don't know if it's the right word. To give the silhouette a more impressive aspect, more majestic, or something like that. And it's so over the top, and it looks like Hollywood, by the way.
Exactly, she could be an actress.
Oh yes, definitely.
Same thing here, you know. A lot of in this image says France because of the furniture, because of the drawing on the walls, but to me, there is something with the colors that says a movie set in a way.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it says movie set or interior design, but in the United States and not in France. Well, in spite all the paneling and furniture are with the the 15th. Well, the color which is chosen for the paint of the paneling is typical of the taste of the American interior designers of the late 30s and the beginning of the 40s. In France, we could have chosen something a little more shaded. And well, then in the States, they wanted to restitute the bright colors, the original bright colors of the 18th century. That was something completely new. And that's very interesting in my opinion. But this choice of color for this period of time is absolutely American and is matching as well the colors of the Technicolor movies, who had to be very impressive at the same time, not naturalistic at all. Here it's definitely American, of course, for the...
Why do you say so?
Sorry?
Why do you say so, that it's so American?
Oh, only for the, well, first of all, for the silhouette, for the attitude, for the slacks, those particular slacks for going on the beach. Well, we had that in France, but not exactly this type of things. The accessories are very very whimsical and very full of ideas of creation. It's a little too much for a French style, and it's rather inspired by the work of the costume designers in Hollywood. The silhouette of the woman and even his face is definitely American. Mm-hmm. And well, when you have the list of the clothes and garment, well, it says it comes from American department stores as well.
And the more we're getting into those images, we see that this is obviously scenes from somewhere in the US. You know, and dogs always as a fashion accessory.
Oh yes, always. On the previous image, the poor fashion accessory was a little tired and thirsty due to the heat on the beach, apparently. But here, I think it's interesting. We're now in 41 for Vogue, and you have well, you see the first illustration on the left could be almost an advertising for Ralph Lauren in the 1980s. It's all the mythology of country life in America, in Connecticut, let's say, just to sum up. That's a type of outfit which was not very popular in France, well, especially during the wartime, I must admit. With the slacks, with the jacket, the attitude is very masculine as well. She plays with the contrast between her very feminine beauty and her masculine attitude. You have something which is very whimsical in the colors at the same time, with the asymmetrical scarf inside the shirt. Well, that's to me, that's American mythology. Well, from France, it's absolutely obvious. And same thing with the illustration on the right-hand side. Well, it says high life, it says upper class, because you have a little manor in the background, which could be a little manor in Normandy. You have a pack of hounds, which says hunting, fox hunting, certainly something as elegant and as cruel as that, but which says we are in America, are the outfits worn by the two women there amongst the hounds. Well, imagine that in Europe, well, you know, hunting and all this surrounding says something very conservative, very upper class. And in France or in Great Britain, it could have been absolutely impossible to be worn this way in this type of situation. But here, what it says is you certainly have a tennis court by the little manor, by the pack of hounds, but it says also that you have a swimming pool, because under the jacket you have something like the top of a swimsuit worn by the woman, and it implies that maybe after visiting the hounds, she goes by the swimming pool and enjoys sunbathing or something like that, which is, well, you have all the things all the belongings of the American upper class of the East Coast here, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And then we're going to see in the next one that, but still for night, for the theater, the opera, it's still haute couture, French haute couture that is valuable.
Yeah. But I don't know, maybe it's in my eyes, but to me, it's typically American, this, the aesthetic of this illustration. Because first of all, the model, the idealized models, look like American actresses of this period of time, of 39, once again. But the garments are French. The little hat, or I don't know how to call that, with a veil, on the left is by Chanel. The outfit in the middle is by Molineux, and the suit with the blue gloves, with the striking blue gloves. It's not shocking pink, but it's striking blue. That's an invention of mine. Is by Schiaparelli. And the way it's composed, it comes from a movie to me. And you have this art of color and the use of the contrast of colors that you have in movies by then. Well, here it's a photo from a very famous movie by George Cukor, The Women in 39, which is a very important year in the career of Renee Bouët-Willaumez, but in this type of aesthetics. And well, you see those the attitudes, the silhouettes, and the faces and the expressions of those women, where it's like a fashion illustration.
Absolutely, same thing. We see exactly the same element of what we saw previously on the illustration. And once again, attitude and the way the body moves and pose.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it's just about the hips. In those years, there's something hard to move that, but the hips are always projected. The face is what John Crawford's face is very close to the drawings by Renee Villame we saw previously. The three women at the theater, and once again about the influence of Hollywood actresses. Well, you notice, of course, the broad shoulders, much popularized by John Crawford. Well, she was an influencer by then. We have to see her like that. She was as important, I know, as Kim Kardashian or any other influencer by then. And sometimes actresses were also used like models by different designers in France or in the States. They were paid by them to wear their creations, and it's just like now.
Nothing new, really.
No, nothing new at all.
Yeah, but can we say at one point that, of course, we think that French couture influenced the movie Hollywood, and then on the other afterwards, Hollywood influenced the fashion. Even in France.
But it's always in mirror, you know. It's a sort of infinite movement from one influence to another, from imitations sometimes. Well, that's the case here in this illustration in particular. Well, just look at the expressions of the women there. It's like the movie by George Cukor. Yeah. They look very friendly. By the way, have you noticed? Yeah. And it can remind us of a little phrase which was attributed to Salvador Dali or Cristobal Balenciaga. Well, I think no one knows who said that. If someone said this phrase, which is typical of the period, which says, an elegant woman looks always unpleasant. And that was the case previously, I think.
We see with that one that these are actresses in their real life, let's say, and we see the once again the way they are seated, you know, is very natural, very unconventional. Also,
that's unconventional, and that will become something very cool to do in your private life, to show you have attitudes. You're a cool woman. You belong to a privileged background, but you are easygoing, you're funny, you have a lot of wit and everything, and you don't care about conventions.
Exactly.
But up to what point? But well, you recognize certainly Catherine Hepburn on the top, Greta Garbo in
The middle and
anyway. Well,
yeah.
here it's about. Sorry, maybe I'm a little long. Here, that's something new in terms of aesthetics in the cinema. That's the Technicolor aesthetics and the Technicolor range of color. Maybe yeah. Thank you. No, may we have a look on the previous slide, please? We won't stay long on that, but you know, the birth of Technicolor was in the end of the 1920s, but it was much popularized in the late 30s, mainly in 37 with the Garden of Allah, with Marlene Dietrich, with the cartoon Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and after in 39 you had you had Gone with the Wind and another one I can't remember. I should have taken my notes, but anyway, that's not so important. It was a sort of event. Going to a theater and to watch a film in Technicolor was something which was an event because it was just new. It was not supposed to be realistic in terms of color. Because it was impossible. Technically, it was absolutely impossible, but it was the world of dreams at the same time. It was something like a sort of augmented reality, and it was more fairy tale-like. And it was something which was expensive. It was much more expensive to go to a theater and watch a Technicolor movie than a regular white and black movie. Maybe it was twice the price, and you had to book your seat just to make sure to watch this movie. And you have the same phenomenon. I won't be long in the magazines, in the fashion press, because well, from the middle of the 30s. The amount of color pages increased terribly in fashion magazines, in Vogue, for instance, and they something like doubled between 35 and 39. And of course, the price of the magazine for French Vogue in 35 it costed something like 6 francs, and in 39 it costed 10 francs. So we have to keep in mind, because for us. Those pictures in colors and so are absolutely normal and regular, but we have to keep in mind colors was still a luxury in the late 30s and even in the 50s.
Yeah.
So we
if we look at the color precisely, we can see afterwards that these are the exact colors that
yes.
are used by Bouët-Willaumez to paint, to do some background and even dresses.
You're absolutely right. The style of the dresses, of those evening gowns, is very spectacular, very dramatic, very Hollywood-like. By the way, we're in 41 once again. We may be surprised by the choice of color of to have well painted those two figures on a green sheet of paper. That's not a choice. That's something which is a technique, which is a cinematographic process. Well, you know, in those days and a few decades ago, when you wanted to incrust the figure of an actor or the character of an actor on any type of background, he was filmed on a green background. That's the same idea for Bouët-Willaumez, because when he made those drawings, he didn't know the choice of the editor, and here you have the choice of the editor as well.
It's particular to us that those colors.
Yeah. Exactly, this type of colors. And if we can see next slide, you will see that's the exact use and range of colors of Technicolor movies. Well, Snow White, of course, and on the right, it's the final of The Gang's Fall Here, which is a movie from 43. Well, so I think the demonstration is convincing. I hope so, but that's just about that. The same range of color from fashion, illustration, and movie, with this idea of augmented reality.
Exactly. We can also afterwards in the next slide, all those evening gowns that are really bright in color, very different from what we saw from the beginning. In a way.
Well, here it's the dress by Jeanne Lanvin. created just after, just before the Second World War. That's the collection of 39. Normally it should have been reproduced in French Vogue, but finally there was no issue of French Vogue in October 39, and it was first reproduced in US Vogue in 39. By the way, I don't know if it was very easy, if you saw that in New York, to order it in Paris by those war years, but anyway, but the composition, the aesthetic, and so is terribly Hollywood style. To me, it's red carpet. Well, once again, he had certainly a soft spot for little dogs. One more little dog as an accessory, as a fashion.
It's very easy to walk the dog and go to the red carpet.
Yeah. But anyway, the dog was an element of fashion by then too. Well, here it's absolutely Hollywood style, especially the illustration on the right, well, which is literally on a red carpet. And once again, you can see his way of playing with colors, exactly as in a Technicolor movie, with the contrast of the striking blue globes.
But it's not only the way it was drawing, it was also Hollywood that influences the French couture, the way
yeah, maybe a little later. Not necessarily on couture, but on fashion designers in the late 70s or the beginning of the 90s. But yeah, but there was an influence in terms of colors in the 50s, for instance. But because you can find red velvet with the red hue of Technicolor or things like that, and it's always augmented reality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, here the influence of fashion illustration on this those few minutes in the Women by Cucor, when you have a little section in Technicolor, and which is a sort of ironical representation of a fashion show when it's absolutely over the top. It's typically the work of fashion designers hired for Hollywood, but it's almost a caricature of what haute couture should be, and it's also a caricature of the attitudes. And here, well, I just wanted to show you a few little illustrations, a little more in details, just to show his skill about colors, and you know, the little details you can't see in the beginning, but which makes all the difference, such as this little square of bright night blue, if I may say so, just under the jacket, which is just a little thing which illuminates the illustration, and he always used that. You know, it's like in history of movies, like the glass of milk in Suspicions by Alfred Hitchcock. You know, with a little lump inside the glass of milk. But that's the same principle, and it's why I think he's so interesting, because he mixes those two aesthetics. Well, something with the contrast. By the way, this choice of color for the illustration on the left is very Yves Saint Laurent, with this mix of bright red and purple. I like, once again, I really enjoy that. This little flower, pink flower, just on the little hat, which makes the difference as well. Well, you see, it's extremely refined, his use of colors in his illustration, and it's one of the reasons why I really appreciate him, because in the beginning it looks terribly conservative and typical of 2 decades, the late 30s and the 40s. But when you have a closer look to its illustration, well, you see it's everything is perfectly chosen and perfectly mastered, and perfectly mastered. Sorry. And here, 2 other details of 2 illustrations we've seen previously.
That show that he's a great artist, a great painter, a great
craftsman. Yeah, to me, he's a great illustrator. I don't know if he's a great artist. Well, he can't be compared to Velázquez, Goya, or whoever, or Matisse, but he's at least a very, very important fashion illustrator, and he was seen as one of the most important fashion illustrators during his career, with all the rivalry between him and Eric. Carl Erickson knows as Eric. You had other illustrators, but they were the two stars illustrator for the Condé Nast group.
Yes. And that before photography took over illustration, right?
Yeah, exactly. And photography took over illustration during the second part of the 50s, and it's when Renee Villame ended his career and retired to France and married a third wife this time.
And it shows also, that was the story behind this presentation, the relationship between France, the US, fashion, and Hollywood and movie. Yes. And we see that it's a continuous exchange of ideas, of influences that cross the ocean in a way.
I think that's interesting, and that's the point in this transatlantic relationship, because from one part you have tradition with France, but it's not always a conservative tradition, and from the other part of the ocean you have modernity with the US. And something with those two media we've explored with fashion illustration, which is traditional and a little elitist, let's face it, in the case of Vogue or Harper's Bazaar, for instance. And you have a more democratic medium, which will be very, very important to popularize fashion and fashionable attitudes, which is the cinema. Well, that's just about that.
So now maybe it's time for some people to ask questions. If you have some, we'll be happy to voice them to Laurent.
Sylvie, just to let you know, I posted some of the questions on your private chat line as they came along. But just before we go to question, we think it would be really, really important to do what we call a little polling. So everybody, we're going to ask you a question. Just click the answer. It's a multiple choice. And it's a really, really important question. Here it is.
Oh.
Well, there are two questions. The first one is about what do you think is the chicest dog in the world? And after seeing so many illustrations with dogs, we are very inspired. So we have 4 options. You just click on the one you think is the most chic dog. And then our second question is about print. We would like to know, what is your favorite print? I am not sure if you see all of them. You might have to scroll down a bit. We give you option. You give you option like floral, paisley, stripes, polka dots, or the fact that you hate prints, which is okay too with us. So I'm just gonna wait a little bit to see when the line stabilize, and I will give you the result right away. And then Sylvie, that gives you a bit of time to go to your private chat and see there's at least 3 questions there. If not,
I can see that. So
okay, cool.
One is about the models. Were there any models from other countries as they are today, or only from France and America?
Oh no, there were. Well, of course, for historical reasons in Paris, there was a period of time where a lot of models were from Russia. They were white Russian, and sometimes people belonging to the imperial family. Well, you know that with the Lucien Lelong's wife was, well, I don't know, a niece of the Tsar. She was called Natalie Ballet, and she was one of the most famous model of the late 20s and beginning of the 30s as well. And she tried to be an actress in Hollywood. Well, I think she performed in a few movies, but she was of an incredible beauty. But yeah, the two main nations for fashionable models in Paris were Russians and American women.
Interesting.
In the 20s and the 30s, I think.
Yes. Another interesting question. I wonder if he drew everyday stylish people the way that fashion photographers participate in street style, which currently heavily informs current trends. So was he only drawing, couture or women, on other position or type of clothes or?
Well, for the period of time which concerns Bouët-Willaumez, yes, it's about couture and high high level quality ready to wear. But for the 60s, the second part of the 60s, when fashion illustrations comes back, with an illustrator such as Antonio, no, you have things which are much more about street style and so that's not necessarily just about haute couture. In the 80s, you had you also have Vera Montes, who was a very important fashion illustrator. It's about style, and it's about the new designers such as Jean-Paul Gaultier and so you don't have any one answer. It's about the what's the most important in during one decade and another. It's obvious that in the 30s it was just about haute couture.
Yes, he never drew anything else in terms of illustration.
No, not as I know. I don't think so. No, not even illustrations for books or novels or things like that. No. Well, just to illustrate articles about one, like we saw, what's the thing to do to attract men? Well, that's about that. But that was also the opportunity or the alibi to represent the latest creation of one couturier or another.
We have also a question about interior design. We mentioned this interior design that was shaded, that would be more shaded in France.
In the 30s.
In the 30s, exactly. What do you see as the main difference in interior design between French and American designers? Probably, that's the question.
I think it's more daring and much more creative. I don't say that to flatter the American audience, but I think it's much more forward in the 30s and in the 40s in the States than it can be in Europe. Sometimes it's forecast from one decade or another. The trends in interior decoration in Europe, and especially for this use of color, the use of space at the same time is not the same at all. And I think it's more free, by the way, with the choice of elements, when you can mix something very precious with something which is not, but which is witty in terms of volume, of history, or sometimes little objects which were added had a history to tell, or something about the history of the owner, or something like that. And I think it was much more creative, and certainly because of the quality of the settings in Hollywood pictures. Movies.
Once again, there is a strong link.
Yeah, that's very, very important for this period of time.
Do you think that fashion illustration is more impactful than fashion photography, or the other way around? And do you see maybe that fashion illustration could make a comeback due to the renewed concern about carbon footprint, not traveling, and maybe the photo shoot themselves would be not so easy to do anymore, no?
Or it's still possible. Well, if you are in Paris, in New York, or anywhere, and if you don't want to go to Australia, I think it's feasible to organize a photo shoot in not too far, at 100 kilometers or 100 miles from any city. It's true, if you want to photograph a model on the pyramids, well, that's not so very easy. And finally, I'm not sure it should be allowed anymore. That was feasible in the 60s, for instance, with shooting with Diana Vreeland and Henry Clark. But I think it's no, that's not something to do for many reasons. Not only for the difficulty of going from one country to another, but there are things we cannot do anymore, because they could be seen as neo-colonialism or lack of respect from one culture or another. But no, I think it's the same. I think, well, illustration and fashion photos are on the same level. Well, that's true that fashion photography is more important, or in terms of representation in the magazines. That's absolutely obvious when you open an issue of Vogue, whether it be French, American, Italian, or British. But I think it can come back. I think, yeah, I hope so. By the way, because it doesn't say the same things at all.
It's different. It says something else.
Exactly.
Well, as we saw from the illustration, I feel it tells so much more because there's so many details that are carefully picked up. It tells us a story. Each illustration you showed us today was like a journey through the life of people. So I thought it was really fascinating. I want to thank Laurent and Sylvie. We're coming to this end of our hour of fashion today, our chic hour. Laurent in Paris, Sylvie in Paris, everybody else who was with you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your comment. And we will have a recording we'll be able to sell with the thank you so you can share this talk with other people. Thank you to all our team who take part in making the talk a success. And we want to wish everybody une très très belle journée ici à Chicago, à Paris ou à New York.